Good evening, colleagues. My name remains Mabalan Mfundisi, acting in this process as the Sherpa. I think in the next 2 minutes we will start. Our key presenters are here, and they will be driving this process. So at 18:10 exactly, I'm going to kickstart this to do just my introductory remarks, and then I give it over to them. The latecomers will continue coming, and they'll find us on the way, as they have been doing in the 3 other webinars that we have hosted thus far. So in a minute, I will be starting. Colleagues, good day, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. My name is Mabalani Mfundisi. I'm the Sherpa for the C20 process. We welcome you to this webinar that will be dealing with issues relating to our working group on gender and women empowerment. We have the lead facilitators for this platform who will be sharing with us the issues that they have packaged based on the various inputs. We have WhatsApp groups, the WhatsApp group of the Women and Gender Equality Working Group has over 200 participants. So that which the colleagues will be presenting is a collection of multiplicity of voices that have resulted in the policy brief that they will be taking us through, and they will be engaging with us on what is there and some of the issues that they may not have taken into account, that from your inputs, in whatever way they have organized to have this conversation, that they will take notes and see how they include those. So it's not just a one-way street where they come and say, this is what we have. If there are things that you have that they may not have taken into account as they present, they will be open enough to incorporate additional things that are there. So we have the 3 facilitators. Piwa Mangwiro, who is the lead of the working group. She works together with Fatou Ndir from Senegal, very far away from where we are, and the indomitable Kitumetsi Mutluatse. They are here to share, to engage, and to to be empowered and to empower all of us. So my task is done. Once I'm done, I'm gone. It will be them who are in charge and in control of the process, however they have organized it. So ladies, without much ado, let me end here and hand over to yourself as you take us through the package that you have. To you, the facilitating group, I'm now handing over the reins to yourself. All the best and thank you very kindly. We'll still be here, but don't call on us, me, because there's nothing else. I'm just one of those that will be listening to what you have to offer. Over to you, colleagues.
Thank you, Chair Mabalan. Thank you so much for those introductory remarks, as well as for your leadership on this in this process. Good evening, colleagues and friends. It's a privilege to welcome you to this important dialogue on advancing women's rights and gender equality through the G20. My name is Fatou Gaindir. I work for Girls Not Brides, the global partnership to end the child marriage, co-facilitating this group. In this group, we have my colleagues from Sonke Gender Justice as the lead facilitator, and also your host to present this brief today, as well as the Block Woman Caucus as the co-facilitator. So for me, it's just a quick introductory remarks as well to reiterate that 2025 is a pivotal year. Not only does it mark the 30 years since the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, but we have also reached the midpoint of the SDGs. And yet our current pace, achieving gender equality, will take nearly 300 years. This is unacceptable. So the G20 must therefore act with urgency, but also with boldness. Our working group on women and gender equity has developed a comprehensive policy brief that identifies 7 critical areas where transformative action is needed. You will see these critical areas during our presentations. I would just like to highlight what makes this brief unique. This is the way it was created, through partnership that brought together feminist organization, young people, survivors, advocates, and groups such as Sonke Gender Justice, our organization Girls Not Bride, but also the Black Woman Caucus. So these inclusive processes ensure that our recommendations are grounded in real experience and evidence, but not only theory. So today's webinar, we would like to amplify these voices and build the momentum ahead of the G20. So we invite each of you to engage, to challenge us, but also to contribute, as together we can push for structural reform that will deliver real change in the life of women and girls everywhere. I will now hand over to our lead facilitator, Mpua from Sonke Gender Justice. She's our host today to present this brief. Thank you so much, Mpua. Over to you.
Good evening, everyone. And thank you so much, Fatou, for that important foregrounding of the work that we have been doing. And as my colleague Fatou has explained, we are now going to she's already given the necessary background in terms of why the work of this working group is really important and where we are globally in terms of the global processes that that are happening, So I would just go straight to do my presentation, and please do confirm as soon as you can see my screen. Please do let me know if you can now see my screen.
Yes, we can see.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm just trying to put it into slideshow. Okay, so yes, the name of our working group is Women and Gender Equity, and this is our policy group. So really, the key challenges that we identified is as my colleague Fatou has said, that at the rate at which we are going globally, global gender equality would take nearly 300 years, which is not acceptable, because on the general, women and girls make up the majority of our populations, the majority of society. So if we have gender inequality gap continuing to expand, or if at the current rate it will take almost 300 years, that means that on the general, more than half of the global population is being disadvantaged in living under unequal conditions and in an unequal environment. So some of the other issues that we identified is the high prevalence of gender-based violence and its economic cost. You know, gender-based violence remains a global crisis with a devastating social and economic costs. Economically, it costs the global economy an estimated 1.5 trillion annually. And another issue that is a challenge is the structural economic inequality. We have 60% of women work in the informal economy with no social protection, and the gender pay gap remains a major challenge. Also, the burden of unpaid care work. Women perform 3 times more unpaid care work than men, which limits formal economic participation, while also the unpaid care work of people with disabilities remain invisible. There is also the challenge of persistent harmful practices, child marriage, so-called conversion practices, and female genital mutilation continue to violate the rights and limit the potential of millions of women and girls globally, while hate crimes and criminalization of homosexuality in many jurisdictions also present a major threat for LGBTIQ plus persons. Also, another challenge when we're talking with this regard is the underrepresentation in decision-making spaces. Women hold only about 27% of parliamentary seats globally. LGBTQI plus leaders, women with disabilities, young women, and those from rural or migrant backgrounds face compounded exclusion. And when it comes to climate change, conflict, and displacement disproportionately impact women and girls, increasing risks of trafficking, child marriage, and exploitation. And then there's also the challenge of digital exclusion. Women are 18% less likely to own a smartphone and 20% less likely to use mobile internet, hindering economic opportunity and safety. So really, this is just a summary of the issues. But if you read the brief itself, it goes in depth because it even addresses how migrant women and girls are affected. Women and girls living with disabilities are affected by all these different issues that we have highlighted here. And as my colleague Fatu I highlighted, we came up with 7 thematic areas. And the first one is economic inequality and women's empowerment. And these are the recommendations that we made based on the challenges that we identified. We said some of the key recommendations is that our recommendation is to mandate gender responsive budgeting across all G20 economic and recovery packages. And also we recommend the establishment of a permanent G20 gender equality task force with mandatory funded representation from women-led organizations of persons with disabilities, as well as mandate their inclusion in all National Gender Council drafting and review processes. In terms of investment, we are recommending the establishment of dedicated financing for women-led enterprises, including cooperatives, and support inclusive procurement policies. Then legally, we recommend enforce equal pay legislation and ratify, implement the ILO Convention 190 to address harassment in workplaces. Also, we call for expanding universal child care, investment in care infrastructure, and ensure social protection for informal and precarious workers. And then when it comes to digital and financial inclusion, we are recommending that there is a need to close the digital divide by investing in women's digital literacy and ensuring equitable access to fintech solutions. Then when it comes to the gender-based violence and safety recommendations, our recommendation is to establish a G20-wide accountability mechanism to monitor GBV, harmful practices, and hate crimes with aggregated data on SOGISEC. And then also fund and mandate national survivor-centered services, including trauma-informed healthcare, shelters, legal aid, and reintegration programs. And there's also need to ratify and enforce the ILO Convention 190 on workplace harassment, criminalize child marriage, and all forms of female genital mutilation, that is infant, adolescent, adult, and also criminalize conversion practices, urge full implementation and funding of hate crime laws and national strategies with specific protections for women and girls of diverse socioeconomic. And also in terms of programmatic action, we call for expand, our call really is to expand survivor-led advocacy, strengthen digital protections against tech-enabled GBV, and ensure all services are inclusive of LGBTIQ plus persons, women with disabilities, and rural migrant women. Also ensure GBV prevention and response services are accessible to refugee, migrant, and undocumented women and girls, regardless of legal status, including cross-border cooperation to prevent trafficking and exploitation, and also to establish dedicated funding for safe shelters, legal aid, and psychosocial counseling for disabled women and girls. There is also need to fund and mandate universally accessible survivor-centered GBV services which cater for the needs of women and girls living with disabilities, including sign language interpreters, accessible shelters, and information in easy-to-read formats. There's need to ensure sexual and reproductive health rights services and information are fully accessible and that providers are trained on the rights and needs of persons with disabilities. And also, there's need to provide capacity building for police, judiciary, and healthcare workers on social competences and the specific vulnerabilities of LGBTQIA plus persons to GBV. And also there is need for corporate accountability. In this regard, we are calling on the G20 member states to mandate workplace GBV prevention policies and require corporations to audit and address GBV across global supply chains. And then when it comes to political participation and leadership recommendations, we recommend that G20 states enact and enforce gender parity laws for political representation and mandate gender balance on corporate boards across G20. We also recommend that they support leadership training, mentorship, and civic participation programs, particularly for young women, women with disabilities, and LGBTIQ plus persons. And we also further recommend that there's need to criminalize political harassment and violence against women in public life, implement protections in line with the CEDAW General Recommendation 23 and the ILO Convention 190. Then when it comes to programmatic actions, we call on the G20 to fund safe digital platforms for women leaders, to create support programs and protective mechanisms for women and LGBTQIA plus human rights defenders and asylum seekers who face targeted violence, and institutionalize family-friendly parliamentary practices such as childcare support and flexible hours. We are really calling for a feminist foreign policy, and in this regard, we're encouraging G20 members to adopt feminist foreign and development policies that promote inclusive leadership globally. Then when it comes to gender responsive, which is our next thematic focus, which was gender responsive climate change and just transition. Our recommendations are that the G20 member states should mandate gender parity in climate decision bodies and integrate gender in all G20 climate frameworks. We also call for them to earmark funds for women-led climate initiatives and simplify access to climate finance for grassroots, rural, and indigenous women. And also we call on them to protect the rights of displaced women and girls, to criminalize climate-related trafficking, and align policies with the Paris Agreement Gender Action Plan. Also, we call on them to protect the rights of disabled women and girls, including refugees and undocumented persons, by guaranteeing access to services regardless of status, and align migration, gender, and climate frameworks to address heightened risks of trafficking and exploitation. And then on the programmatic front, we call on the G20 to promote gender-sensitive climate technologies and digital access, to scale up universal social protection for climate-affected workers, We call on them to also integrate indigenous and women's ecological knowledge into national adaptation strategies. And also with regards to just transition, that they ensure green economy jobs are accessible to women, to LGBTIQA plus persons and other marginalized groups through quotas, vocational training, and safe working conditions. So when it comes to digital inclusion and safety recommendations, we call on the G20 to mandate gender parity in artificial intelligence and digital governance bodies across the G20 institutions. Further, that they also fund digital literacy programs for women and girls, especially in rural and marginalized communities, and support development of accessible technologies. Also, we call on them to criminalize technology-facilitated gender-based violence and adopt global standards for online safety aligned with CEDAW General Recommendation 35. And then when it comes to programmatic action, we are calling on the G20 to develop gender-sensitive AI systems that eliminate bias, establish national, regional, technology-facilitated GBV data repositories, leverage digital platforms to expand access to sexual and reproductive health rights information, safe online spaces, and economic opportunities for women and LGBTIQA plus persons. We are also calling on them to invest in scholarships and vocational training for women with disabilities, ensuring universal design in digital platforms and physical infrastructure. And also that they require tech companies to implement robust content moderation, privacy protections, and survivor redress mechanisms. So when it comes to adolescent girls and harmful practices and disability inclusion recommendations, in this regard, our group is recommending that the G20 make elimination of child marriage, FGM, across life stages, virginity testing, and conversion practices a priority in all G20 gender equality agendas. Also that they fund youth and feminist-led initiatives, including survivor-led campaigns, and allocate resources for adolescent-friendly SRHR services. And that also they enforce laws setting 18 as the minimum age of marriage, criminalize all forms of FGM, virginity testing, and conversion practices, and strengthen anti-hate crime legislation protecting adolescent girls of diverse SOGISEC. And also that they repeal laws criminalizing consensual same-sex conduct in diverse gender identities and expressions. And when it comes to programmatic actions, we're calling on them to scale up comprehensive sexuality education, to expand access to adolescent-friendly health services, including contraception, safe abortion, and mental health support, develop community-based prevention, engaging traditional and faith leaders as well as men and boys. And also that they ratify and implement the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, fund inclusive infrastructure, ensure all GBV health and education services are accessible to women and girls with disabilities, including through assistive technologies. And so this is just a sum up. I will also go then and also give it in more detail that really we are calling on the G20 to establish a permanent G20 gender equality task force to ensure accountability. We're calling on member states to allocate a minimum of 1% of their GDP to gender equality initiatives, to ratify and ensure key instruments, which we've already alluded to, such as the CEDAW, the ILOC 190, the AU Convention on Ending Violence Against Women and Girls. Sorry about that. And conventions against child marriage and FGM. And we're also calling for inclusive policies, which and that they ensure that all policies explicitly include and protect migrant, refugee, My apologies, colleagues. Yes, I was still saying that inclusive policies which ensure that they include all the vulnerable groups that we have mentioned. And they also ensure that they fund universal social protection, childcare infrastructure, and gender-based violence survivor-centered services. This will be the end of our presentation. Thank you. My apologies there. I just had a bout of coughing. But in terms of our presentation, so having given that background in terms of some of the issues that we have picked, some of the structural issues that are challenges, the structural inequality, cultural inequality, the gender inequality that is continuing, that we have identified, which I hope that many of you have had the opportunity to read the policy in depth. But these are then some of the recommendations that we have, that we are presenting in this policy brief as being key to ensuring that we address the challenges that are facing women globally. I think key to some of that is that we certainly have also addressed some of the cross-cutting principles, which will be intersectionality. We are saying that the policies must reflect the lived realities of diverse women and girls, rural, indigenous, disabled, migrant, in LGBTIQA plus communities. And in terms of migration and displacement, there is a need to ensure all G20 policies explicitly include migrant, refugee, and undocumented women and girls, guaranteeing access to health, to education, to safety, and livelihoods, irrespective of legal status. We are also saying that there is a need for disaggregated data. So there is need for the G20 to ensure that they collect and analyze data by gender, age, disability, rural or urban status, and such like to design targeted interventions. And also there is a need to implement mandatory disability disaggregated data collection across women across all women and gender equality indicators. So the proposed C20 gender equality scorecard must explicitly track and report outcomes for women and girls with disabilities to ensure accountability. And then one of the cross-cutting principles as well has always been targeted interventions. We are calling on the G20 to abandon the one-size-fits-all approaches, because women and girls are not homogeneous in nature. So there is need to prioritize tailored responses for marginalized groups. And also there's need to build solidarity across feminist, labor, climate, disability, and LGBTIQ plus movements to strengthen advocacy. And another cross-cutting issue is financing and investment justice. We're saying there's need to reform multilateral lending criteria to incentivize gender equality. And there's need to allocate at least 1% of GDP to gender equality nationally, and create a 5% public procurement set aside for businesses owned by women with disabilities, and support their access to credit in markets. And we're also advocating for global South solidarity, that there is need to elevate South-South feminist networks and grassroots movements as central actors in policy design and monitoring. And also we're saying there's need for community-led solutions. So we're calling on the G20 to invest in women's cooperatives, youth-led initiatives, and survivor-driven campaigns. And also finally, there is need for transparency and accountability. So in this regard, there's a need for the establishment of a G20 gender equality scoreboard with annual public reporting, participatory monitoring, and civil society oversight. And yeah, and also civil society oversight, so that we ensure that there is transparency and there is equality, because we are saying that gender equality is really both a moral imperative and an economic necessity, and it is very integral to tackling today's most urgent challenges, from economic recovery, digital transformation, to climate change and global peace. And the cost of inaction is very high for the G20 to continue to turn a blind eye to that. So I will end it there and say this is the end of our presentation. And we'll now be open to contributions and comments and your engagement. Thank you. The floor is now open for comments, questions, additions, where we may have left out key issues. We are open to that now. So the floor is yours. Dimakatso, you can go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. Hello, Mpiwa.
Hello.
Am I
Yes.
audible?
Yes, now you are audible. There was just a moment of break, but now you're audible.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to commend the team on a brilliant work. I think the presentation summarized quite to detail what was discussed and what was presented, and how you structured it in terms of each subheading and the subclauses that reads to what we actually have suggested in the group. I just wanted to commend the team, and that I hope that it does get the attention it deserves, because the points really touch the critical points that are really necessary for this working group to be had, and at least be at a level of priority, not obviously ahead of other working groups, but especially that it affects women and all the gender races and all the women that we have been covered, and the struggles that are being faced in this group. So I just wanted to say that brilliant work. The presentation is summarized so well. It speaks to what we had suggested and what we anticipate that will be taken into consideration. So well done on that.
Thank you, Dimakatso. And then I am seeing Fatu, please also help me if I'm not seeing all the other hands. I see there is Caroline. I'm not sure if you are the first person. You may go ahead.
No, thank you. Good evening, colleagues. I think the latter speaker is just, I wanted to say we really appreciate, because we have seen the work that, in the working group, that we've given ideas, we've done we have worked as a teamwork, and for us to be seeing the work that it has been done and how far we are today, we really appreciate. Thank you so much to you and the team. And I'm very, it's like, I can see that Caroline Magumbi, she's there, and Mobile Shabalala, they are here. Yesterday, we attended the working group for the digital, the system one. So most of the things that we have spoke about in the working group for the working group 5, the recommendation and all that, it tallies with what we spoke about also yesterday. So we really want to appreciate so much. Thank you. You know what? Yeah, let's get the ball rolling. Keep it up. Thank you so much, and God bless you.
Thank you so much, Caroline, for that contribution. I'm not seeing any further hands, so we're open for more hands and comments, colleagues. But I'm seeing that here in the comments section, there's a There's a comment here which says on gender budgeting and scaling women businesses, financial institutions should play a role in assisting women by guiding them on how to write financial plans. This should include government departments and state-owned like IDC. Yes, I think indeed, if that kind of technical support is also given to women, it would be useful, because we may say that there should be resources availed for them, but if there's a gap in terms of their ability to put out their financial plans and how they're and so forth, then there may also be a gap. And then Nomonde says, thank you so much for such a powerful presentation. My concern, though, is always on transparency and accountability. Thank you for touching on that. I just think we need to strengthen our strategies around that, and that is Nomonde. So thank you, Nomonde, for that. And yes, I think maybe we would also appreciate some suggestions from everyone on the floor in terms of how else we can strengthen transparency and accountability, because we know that the laws can come into place, but often we are failed when it comes to that implementation, when it comes to that commitment to really ensure that gender equality and to ensure that women's rights are protected and implemented. It's almost most of the time seems like a nice to do that governments, politicians, and state entities will do to tick the box, but we really would want to be some solid mechanisms of accountability so that we can see this, we can ensure that the policies are well informed, are well enforced, and the recommendations that we are made are really implemented. So we would be open to further suggestions if there are others who can suggest how best they think we could also go about that. And I think there is also a comment that another colleague just put on my WhatsApp. They were not able to post it here, and they were just saying, unfortunately, although I say we advocate for contraceptives, but how many countries are making this resource available? Can this be strengthened? Also, what does it mean given the US and their sentiments on contraceptives? How can this be prioritized for the global South women? The US doesn't provide free contraceptives. I think this one is open for us to then engage and say, how do we, what does it mean? How does this get navigated, considering that the other countries like the G20, like the US, their policies, their stance on contraceptives, and also knowing that we're literally handing over to them. So I would also say we can open it up here for engagement, but I also see there's a hand. Muna, can I not massacre your name?
It's Monax Janet Monakamwe. Actually,
Janet,
picks up from my email. Yes.
And then here I am. I was thinking I'll massacre your name. Please go ahead.
I guess it always borrows for my email that's used for this. Greetings, revolutionary greetings, colleagues. I'm so sorry. I'm actually straddling in between my daughter's award-giving evening and so I'll try to be quick. Sorry, forget about the noise behind in the background. So I would really want to express my uttermost gratitude to the team for a great job. This is highly commendable, to you and to your team. I think from a feminist perspective, anyway, I identify myself as a Pan-African feminist scholar, and I think you have done precisely just what is expected when it comes to gender mainstreaming. What I mean is that you didn't just kind of restrict yourself from the raw gender dynamics, but you went further to expand into the various critical sectors that affect women, from workplaces to climate justice to health, to quite a number of issues. this is really highly commendable, and I think you've also partly covered our working group 14, which is specifically looking at the just energy transition and environment and climate sustainability in some way, because we're actually struggling. We're trying to ensure that we have this gender responsive, policies from a climate and just energy perspective. And I'm glad that it's actually covered. And we'll also obviously have to complement from our own standalone policy brief. I'm not so sure if I had much in terms of digital technology and how we could leverage this, other than, of course, the issues around cyber crimes that are related to gender-based violence in a way, but also obviously in terms of ensuring that girls and women and obviously LGBTI community, people living with persons living with disabilities, particularly women, are not left behind in this digital revolution. I thank you.
Thank you, Janet, for your contributions. I see Maria's hand is also up. Then I'll also come and maybe reinforce what we said under the digital technologies. And if there are further comments or contributions, then they'll be welcome. Maria, you can go ahead.
Thank you, ma'am. Good evening, colleagues. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay,
Evening.
thank you. Yesterday I was struggling to can follow you because my speaker this side was not audible. So today I heard the last the speaker before this one mentioning things of contraceptives. I wanted to contribute. I don't know if maybe it was touched, the sanitary towels. That going into periods is not by choice, it's a natural thing and doesn't segregate between rich and poor. So a poor young woman who still has to go to school cannot afford sanitary towels that are costly and turn into a business that is profitable. Shouldn't we have a policy whereby, like grants, South Africa, I don't know with other countries, whereby sanitary towels can be for free and then reusable, so that we can try to strike the balance between environmental safety and also catering for women. Because really, usually, I once heard the term called pink tax. We are taxed to be female and still unemployed and underpaid. So I think something needs to be talked about, be done, and maybe cooperatives or small businesses which are led by women can produce reusable towels for sanitary. That's my small contribution that always aid me. And then thank you for the presentation that you did today. It was quite informative, and I think it represents our issues as women. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your contribution. Yes, I will start also by responding to what you've said, that yes, there certainly is need for us to address the issue around sanitary towels and address what they call the period poverty, to address that and see how it can be incorporated, because there is need to address that. It is a major challenge, and I think there's been a lot of conversation around if things like male condoms can be easily available and even available for free. What about something like period, like sanitary wear for periods for women, which is something that is not by choice, that is not optional. So thank you for highlighting that. And then I see also someone made in the comments that period cups, they last at least 8 years. So there's also a suggestion there of probably having something like period cups that last for 8 years. Then I wanted to come to what Janet had asked, to say she may not have had our suggestions when it comes to digital inclusion. And I think we did address a digital inclusion, where we said that there is need for gender parity in artificial intelligence and governance bodies. We also talked about funding digital literacy programs for women and girls, particularly from the marginalized communities, and also supporting the development of accessible technologies. We also addressed the issue of the need to criminalize technology-facilitated gender-based violence, and also adopting some global standards for online safety, which are aligned with your CEDAW recommendations. And also, when we said in terms of programmatic actions, then we call on the G20 to develop gender-sensitive artificial intelligence systems, which eliminate bias, which and also that they establish national and regional technology facilitated GBV data repositories, also leverage digital platforms to expand access to sexual and reproductive health right information, to create safe online spaces and economic opportunities for women and LGBTIQ persons in the space. And we also called on the G20 to invest in scholarships and vocational training for women with disabilities, ensuring universal design in digital platforms and physical infrastructure. And we are calling on corporate accountability, and we're saying that may the G20 require tech companies to implement robust content moderation, privacy protections, and survivor redress mechanisms. So that's on the thematic area that's focusing specifically on digital inclusion and safety recommendations. But across, we were also addressing it in some aspects when we were talking, for instance, around economic inequality and women's empowerment. So we did also touch on the need to close the digital divide by investing in women's digital literacy and also ensuring equitable access to fintech solutions. So these are just some of the recommendations that we put across where the digital technology is concerned. So I will then take on your hand again. I see Janet, your hand is up again. I don't know whether it's a legacy hand or it's a new hand, but if it's not a legacy hand, please come in. Janet, can you hear me?
Sorry, it's a legacy, and I'm trying to raise it down, but yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, if it's a legacy hand, that's fine. But I'm also just want to check whether you have seen how we.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yes, I sorry, like I had acknowledged and highlighted earlier that I'm in between two meetings, so I think I had missed the first part. But yes, this is really exciting. I think in terms of skills revolution, particularly in maybe if you could also just add in the mining industry, which is predominantly male, because there are issues that are really specific to that particular sector when it comes to skills development in engineering sectors and so forth. But we'll talk about it at some other time, just not to add too much on your table, but brilliant work. Thank you so much to you and team once again. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm checking. I'm not seeing any other hands, but there is a comment that came from Madichava And she's saying, thank you for coordinating and drafting the report. My last contribution, recognition of unpaid labor in women's access to land. Unpaid care and domestic labor predominantly carried out by women remains invisible in law and policy, leaving full-time mothers vulnerable during divorce and in later life. To close this justice gap, we call for legal recognition, amend family and matrimonial laws to value unpaid care work in divorce settlements, inheritance, and spousal maintenance, and integrate care credits into pension and social protection systems. And then the economic transition, expand land rights, credit rights, and enterprise financing to women whose unpaid care work has sustained households, enabling them to build value chains in agriculture and other sectors. And then the multiplier effect, recognizing unpaid labor and granting access to productive resources empowers mothers to move from invisible work to visible economic actors, creating jobs, mentorship, and resilience for women. Thank you for those very clear contributions, clear and succinct contribution. I do not have any further comments in the chat section. So I'm going to come back to check if there's any other comments, contributions. The floor is still open, colleagues. Okay, I'm not sure whether silence means content or it means that we are still processing. But maybe while we're still processing, what we're essentially, what we also just wanted colleagues to take note of is we tried as much as possible to be robust in our suggestions, but also we were cognizant of the fact that there were other working groups who are also working on the issues that we are dealing with and that we're dealing with. And in that regard, so you will find that I just saw the, yes, my baby, mommy is in a meeting. Thank you, my girl. Oh, sorry for that, colleagues. You know, the after hours meetings sometimes have such interruptions. That I was just highlighting that. So we were also leaving room for expansion from other working groups in terms of some of the aspects that we may, that other working groups were also focusing on. Yes, Comrade Mavalane, you may go ahead.
Yeah, mine is about that particular point. I'm in darkness. I look like a book. So regarding that point for the C20, there's a process that has to happen at G20 for the G20 summit, where we have to consolidate various inputs from the various engagement groups. So I'm just putting on the spot, but what would be your proposal in terms of how we bring what we have through USC20 and facilitate it with others for there to be a common consolidated issue regarding women and gender empowerment issues to be presented at the G20 Social Summit, and through that to get to the G20 leaders platform.
Okay, I got parts of you. Sorry, I was still trying to manage a disruption at the back in my background. So you are saying you wanted to find, you are asking what the process could look like in terms of consolidating the recommendations that have been made around women empowerment. Sorry, I missed something. I apologize. I had a little person who was...
For us as an interested party to ensure that we consolidate these collective voices from different stakeholders on the same topic, what would you as the working group under C20 dealing with this area propose need to be done in order for that consolidation to happen, so that there is no 10 different proposals from people working on women and gender equality, when it could be consolidated into one bumper, process. Yes. So what is What leadership do you propose that be taken regarding that consolidation with others?
Oh, okay. So I think the consolidation, because women and gender equality is sort of like a cross-cutting issue, in as much as it's a group, like it's a standalone, it is its own working group. It's more or less a cross-cutting issue. So maybe if we could then, like for instance, the process that has started now of looking at what are the similarities in terms of the recommendations that are being made from different groups, and then maybe if we could have a platform where we could have we could then engage all the working groups to tease out all the recommendations that have come, for instance, to then say, okay, these are the recommendations from working group one, working group whatever. Can we then tease them out and make them and ensure that they're incorporated as much as possible in this document that is on the women and gender equality working group, but also bearing in mind that it will not necessarily mean that, because here we're talking about gender mainstreaming. So what it still means is that even in those working groups, even those across those thematic areas, we will still need to see it coming out. The issues around gender equality still needs to come out in those groups, but maybe we can have a shared platform to really see what other contributions have been made that we can engage with, ensure that they still find expression in what the co-working group has said, but that they also still remain in the different working groups, because ultimately we want the gender mainstreaming to be visible across all the working groups, regardless of the thematic area and the issues. I'm hoping that I addressed the question. Thank you. I'll also check if there are other colleagues who want to make a contribution in terms of what Comrade Mavalane has asked, because it's an open question to say, how do we make sure that we've really have a process where we can consolidate everything instead of having different pieces. Yeah. And then I see Nga's hand is up. Ngam, you may go ahead.
Good evening, Mpiwa. Good evening, colleagues. Firstly, let me acknowledge and write on the sentiments of previous speakers. This was a really well thought out and comprehensive presentation. Thank you for delivering it so succinctly. Mine goes to a little bit to what Comrade Mabalane was saying in terms of making sure that the synergies with other working groups, and I speak on behalf of the Equitable Health for All, really come through. So in all the topics and recommendations that you have provided, including the digital component, including gender parity, health remains a critical component. In our working group, you'll hear on Friday, things like PHC come out quite strongly. You mentioned unpaid care work, but the other component to that often doesn't find expression is the impact of health and the inability to access health services due to exclusion from economic participation, for example, don't really feature. And I think my suggestion or recommendation or little thought would be, when we are looking at the gender consideration, a concerted effort to include that into design and implementation of health initiatives as a suggestion, and also looking at how the biological and social and cultural factors influence the health-seeking behavior and the health experience of women. I think it was Janet who made the comment around mining, for example. There are women who live in mines, but because the focus is usually on understanding mining as a male-dominated space, conversations around health access for women, whether it be on prevention or treatment, are often limited. How do we ensure that this effort is brought in? If we look at our global north, women often function like on your farms, they function in artisanal work where health is not a priority. So my suggestion and ask would be for us to overcome the gender-based disparities in health, we need to ensure that our ask to the G20 also includes how women are experiencing negative social factors and how that affects their overall health. I want to also just add on that we mentioned the conversation around SRHR, and a lot of the modeling around that is more what is the word? It's more reactive than it is proactive. I don't know in your 1% motivation if it can be concertedly put there that SRHR services are integral for body autonomy. So even when we're looking at the just energy transition, for a woman to be able to participate and experience the full impact of a positive just energy transition, their body and what happens to their body is an integral part. So my ask would be, can you include some of our recommendations or one sentence from our recommendation on body autonomy and health prioritization as a tool to overcome gender disparity?
Thank you about that. Thank you about that input. And maybe what we would, yes, we will certainly go and look into your policy and pull up that recommendation and put it up. And yeah, I think maybe also if we could work with the support that we've already been getting, like from GRIA, to then identify in terms of other working groups where they have raised issues which we may not have which we may not have captured on our side, so that we all seem to resonate and speak from the same language. But that is well noted. I also see there's a comment from, so it's also Madichava. Last, I might have missed this, but here's a suggestion, call to action. If governments can guarantee food, shelter, and healthcare for prisoners, they can and must guarantee the same for survivors of violence. Protecting women and girls is not charity, it is justice and nation building. Thank you for that comment. We did make a comment here, and so maybe I just want to check with you whether it is not as comprehensive, because we did address the need for accessible shelter. We did say that establish dedicated funding for safe shelters, as well as legal aid and counseling for displaced women and families. And we also called for accessible survivor-centered GBV services, which cater for the needs of women, including women living with disabilities, and including sign language interpreters, accessible shelters, and easy to read information. So we did call on them and all to fund shelters, but I'm just perhaps checking if we think that needs to be strengthened further. So maybe I'll pose this as a question to you, Madichaba, to say, do you think with this need for us to strengthen it further? Because we did call for that, for the funding of shelters for survivors, and shelter, and that they should also be survivor-centered, cater for the needs of survivors, women and their families. Okay, I'm seeing a thumbs up. I'm checking, does it mean that, can you, are you able to respond? Am I audible?
Yes, you
Yes, you
are.
are. Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. Okay, thank you. I thought that maybe I have gone quiet. But no, we can't hear you, Madichaba. We cannot hear you. Have you unmuted your mic?
Okay, I have now. Yes, I think my point has to do with the victim empowerment program that includes also the LGBTQ girls and women. So it shouldn't be 3 months. Remember, with our last webinar, I did suggest that the safe houses, they cannot be there for 3 months. It's short. It's a short time to actually heal and empower the person. So the suggestion should probably be clear in terms of we really want that to go beyond 3 months. The ones that go beyond 3 months, they are not government funded. And then you have government and private sector who are still keeping them for 3 months and expect them to, to be up and running, and they have space, they know where they're going. So 3 months, it's quite short. So clarity on that would actually empower women to say they go to the shelter, it's 6 months, and every 12 weeks they sort of do an outpatient system.
Okay, that is noted. That is noted. I'm checking if other colleagues want to contribute to respond to that. Okay, I'm seeing that the silence is holding. So I'm going to check one last time if there are still any further comments or contributions that colleagues need to make as we probably prepare to move towards a wrap. Okay, there's a comment from Janet. Thank you, Etinga. Thank you, Etinga, for elaborating on the issue of women in the mining industry. We need to amplify old and new struggles for women in both formal and informal mining. With regards to exclusionary measures within the context and discourse of critical transition minerals. However, I totally acknowledge the constraints of embracing such in your policy brief, given the scope and limitations. Okay, this is, thank you for that. Yeah, it's Janet, it's noted, and maybe we'll just reach out to you because we're also trying to keep the policy brief within, within consumable length and all, but we will try to also engage you to see how best we can include that and also still try to be mindful of. I think, as I'd highlighted, one of our approaches had been to just, in some issues, we had just touched on them and left them to, with the hope that the other working groups will then expand on them so that our brief is still manageable. But I do acknowledge that we did not necessarily have much on issues around the extractive industry, the mining industry. So maybe we can engage you and also see how best we can frame it. So colleagues, one last time, I'm going to check if we have any comments or contributions or feedback that we want to give before we wind up. Going once, going twice. Well, gone. It will look like there are no further comments in the room. Thank you so much for the feedback and the contributions that you've given us. We are also going to reflect on those and address them and incorporate them. I think at this point, I will hand back to Comrade Mavalane. It's a wrap from our side. Okay, it would look like we are done, colleagues. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for the contributions. Comrade Mabalan, I'm handing back to you. We are done on our part.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, colleagues. You have driven this ship. We are now, we have arrived safely, and we look forward to the next one, which will be tomorrow again at 12, another one at 6 o'clock. We keep on, I think people get intimidated, but it is your content. You have worked on it, and any day you should be able to tell anyone these are the issues that we have put out there. So taking charge, taking leadership is what we are looking forward to. It will be recorded. It will also be placed on our YouTube platform. So without much ado, thank you very kindly, colleagues. We bring this meeting to an end, to a close. Meeting is adjourned. Oh, seminar is over, not meeting is adjourned.
Thank you so much. Have a great evening, colleagues.
Thank you all.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you so much, Fatu.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. I hope we managed to capture some of the key stuff, right?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you
Well
so
done.
much. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Thank you so
Bye.
much.